Today we are here with Chip Donohue, the founding director of the Technology and Early Childhood Center, senior fellow and member of the advisory board and the Fred Rogers Center for Early Learning and Children's Media at Saint Vincent College. In this interview, he will discuss how and when to introduce technology to your children and share tips for surviving the digital age of the family. Chip, thank you so much for coming on here today. It's such an important topic. I think everyone is no one knows how to handle technology in their children, and I really appreciate you sharing all of your research and insight.
Happy to do that. Yeah. It is a hot topic.
It is a hot topic. And so I guess I'll start with the big question. I mean,
sure.
When, at what age, and how should you introduce your child to technology?
Yeah, that probably is the million-dollar question. No easy answers. I guess the easiest answer is for the youngest children, infants and toddlers.
Mm-hmm.
Below 18 months, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no screen time. I really think what children need in those earliest years is human relationships, and they learn language by talking to parents and all of that. So screens really aren't a big deal and don't need to be part of their lives at that point. I think younger preschoolers, 3s, 4s, and 5s are living in a world full of screens. They're familiar with them in ways that we don't even understand because it's new to all of us, but they've been born into this. So I'm very comfortable with preschoolers using computers, but I'm wanting the use to be intentional and appropriate. I'm wanting parents or educators to be thinking about what are they doing, how long are they doing it for, why a screen versus something else. There's always that trade-off between time on the screen and time outside or time playing in a different way. So I think parents and educators need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, so that's such a big question because I feel like, especially that young age, I mean, the technology that as we know it today, were not designed for kids. They were designed for adults, and they were designed to make us addicted to it. So how can you moderate a child who doesn't have any impulse? How can you teach them to not? I mean, like, because I feel like when you see a child that they can't get enough of it, like they yell or they want it back, and so it's kind of like, should you just try not to give it to them at all, or you think it's okay?
Yeah, no, I think not giving them at all is a parent's choice. If that's the way you decide to raise your kids, I'm not going to argue with you about that. But I don't think it's necessary to say no screens. Mm-hmm. I do think kids are growing up in a world full of screens. Everywhere they look, there's another kind of screen in front of them. So that familiarity is important. I think that young kids are this is their world. They need opportunities to use the tools of their world, tools of the culture, tools of the day, tools they see their parents using all the time. Right. And so I think when it comes to kids, there might be a fuss at the end of the game playing time when you say turn it off or let's do something else. I always joke that, well, that's the child's job. The 4-year-old is supposed to fuss. That's what 4-year-olds do. You're the adult. You're supposed to say that the end is here, and that's what you do. So setting limits, I think, is important. Being aware of, how much is too much. If your own instinct as a parent is, it's long enough on the screen, then it has been long enough. That's fine. That's enough. And trust your instincts on that.
So the younger kids, the 3, 4, 5-year-olds, for example, what kinds of things are okay? Would you recommend are okay then for them to be doing?
Sure. So I really, I know the word addiction gets thrown around a lot and it gets great headlines and gets a lot of attention. I think it's completely inappropriate for the youngest children. I've not seen a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, or 5-year-old addicted. In the medical language, we're starting to say problematic screen use. So, there are kids that have trouble letting go of that or want to make that as their number one choice to the exclusion of other things we know are developmentally important. So I think that's one. I always say, look for interactive media and interactions with others. So look for things that kids are doing on the screen, on the tablet screen, that are interactive and that engage them. They're not just passive. But then also things that will draw others into it. So it might be a parent, it might be a sibling, might be a friend, but these can be very social technologies, even though what we mostly are worried about is that they'll be isolated.
So do you have a couple of specific examples of something that, like a game or something?
Yeah, I hate to hem and haw, but I don't tend to call out specific products because in my role, people see that as an endorsement or another. So let me answer it in a different way. I think tools that are open-ended, tools that are ways that kids can learn about their world, an iPhone, an iPad, a tablet, a smartphone can be an amazing tool for exploring the world, taking a photo of something, making a little video about something, talking into the thing and recording their own voice. So I'm really excited about digital storytelling and how these tools can help kids tell stories in new ways, in ways they couldn't before. That ought to be the marker of whether the technology is useful or not. Does it allow the child to do something in a different way or do something they couldn't do before?
Okay. So in terms of brain development, I know I guess there isn't enough research, but can you speak to at all like how technology impacts the use of technology impacts the development of a young child's brain?
Yeah, so there is research coming. Most of the research is looking for evidence of technology being a problem. So there's already a bias in the literature around addiction and let's prove that these things are addictive. So I worry a little bit about that. We have some new research that really has aggregated lots of studies and lots of data that have been pulled together and finding, interestingly enough, that there's a slight negative effect of screen time on a child. It's very slight, very small, and it's so slight that it's not really any more problematic than the child eating potatoes is the headline that came out recently. Too many potatoes isn't good either. So, where's the moderation? Where's the balance? And I think that's important. What I would say to you is we need the research to provide the evidence. Those of us who think technology is great for kids and are excited about what it can do, we're hedging our bets. We don't know. It could turn out that we're wrong about that. Those who are saying no technology and it's a disaster could be wrong about that, or they could be right. I tend to think the answer is going to come somewhere in the middle, and I also think we're missing the individual child, right? So we're just throwing all 3-year-olds in a bucket and saying technology is no good for 3-year-olds, but there might be a 3-year-old who's really ready for the technology and doing well with it, or a 3-year-old where it is more of a problem. So people want one answer. It's much more nuanced than that.
Yeah, it's hard to navigate through this. So you're more saying the technology is good in the way that it's more of an engaging thing versus just throwing them in front of a screen and having them watch shows and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question because that's that kind of passive versus active discussion that comes up. We all, you, me, everybody, spend some time passively in front of screens in our lives. We watch a favorite television show or whatever. Yeah. So I'm not saying that passive viewing has to go completely away, but I'd really like to move kids along from consumption to creation, to using these tools as a tool for learning, for documenting their learning, for showing you what I know, for communicating with grandma. But all of these ways in which these tools are powerful is much more interesting to me than just plopping them in front of a screen. If we have an occasion to plop a child in front of a screen, then I'm wanting a highly interactive experience where the child is, maybe sitting passively, but is not passive in terms of their intellect and their hands. They have to engage in order to participate. That's at least a step in the right direction.
I want to ask you one question. Why do you think that all the media is so negative on it then, and there's not more of the positive things? Why do you think it's just like a fear of the unknown, or why do you think it's?
Yeah, I do track headlines and the ratio of alarming, fear-mongering, and things that are going to make parents feel guilty headlines are much higher than the stories we do get around what's going on at a Montessori school in our community where they're using technology in a really interesting way. So, we're not getting those stories. I would guess as a non-media person that it's, that's pretty easy to understand. It gets more attention. It gets more headlines. It's the stories that we can tell. It tends to confirm for parents who are already nervous about this that, see, I knew we shouldn't use this. So I think we need a more balanced story. I think those of us who are working in the work that I do are trying to tell positive stories about how technology is being used well, not just say that it can be, so that parents can also see the other side to it. But too much of anything is too much, right? So too much screen time is too much, and too much of anything else is. And so parents need to have the whole thing in mind. And sometimes parents hear in the headlines, you need to have balance with your media, and they think that's a 50-50. It isn't 50-50. Balance is when the media use fits into everything else you believe the child should be spending their time doing during their waking hours. Then you've got balance. We're out of balance when the technology takes over.
Right. That's an important point to make. And also with the parents' use of technology. So then kind of going into I guess you're going into the education. So Montessori, for example, in general, they don't advocate the screen. So what do you think Maria Montessori today would say about technology and how the developing, especially the first plane of development or second plane of development?
Yeah, it's a really fun question to imagine. And before I answer the Maria Montessori side of it, I will say I'm a firm believer that old child development theory can inform new use of these tools. We ought to go back to Montessori. We ought to look at Vygotsky. We ought to see what Piaget had to say. They had a lot to say about tool use. This is a different kind of tool. They didn't even imagine this kind of tool. But I think we can look for some guidance there. I'm finding in my work that the Montessori community is opening up a little bit about this. It's kind of what seems to be a program by program decision. But I think Maria would have loved these tools. They're didactic in the same way as the tools she designed. They can be used for a period of time toward mastery and put back on the shelf right where they're supposed to go for the next child to use them. I think she was curious enough intellectually and also committed enough in her own methodology that she would have said, well, this is a fantastic tool for learning. Bring it on. Let's figure out how to use it.
Right. Okay. And then, so in terms of I guess when you're comparing, when you're going back in time, when we grew up, everyone's like, don't sit in front of the TV. It's, not going to be good for you. And so would you compare those two things, the technology and television, in terms of development?
We have to. Number one, because children's screen time is predominantly watching television still. We're getting all excited about these other digital devices, but the data is pretty clear. The most time kids spend in front of a screen is a television. So that's something we're familiar with. Hey, I was a child of the 60s. I watched way too much television by any measure. And I think I turned out reasonably okay. I think we have to be reasonable in our thinking about it, but children today have many more screens than just that one TV. So this definition of screen time was a lot easier. It wasn't necessarily easier to get me to turn it off, but it was only one screen that we're talking about. How much television watching before Chip should do something else? Now it's my phone, the tablet, the desktop computer at home, the television, all the screens that are in their world. It's a much more screen-filled environment than it was before. And you asked earlier about kind of the lure of the screen. Screens do have a lure for kids. And so the fact that there are many more of them in their world, I think really requires us to be more mindful than ever, but not afraid of screens. Embrace them, but for the right reasons.
Is there any studies done on the correlation of using technology earlier in their IQ or development?
Correlation is the important word here. The data that we do have, the studies that we've seen, sometimes finds correlation between technology use and obesity, technology use and outdoor play time, right? Technology use and passive play versus active play. But it's a correlation. Maybe it's related. There's no causation, as in if you use a computer, you will become obese, right? Which is kind of absurd for me to say, but that's the kind of headlines that we get oftentimes. Yeah. So it's not a straight line. But for some children, the computer could really draw them into the game world and playing and not wanting to be off the screen. And that could lead to more passive activity, more sedentary time. That could lead to problems with weight. So you can see where the chain could come from. But I always encourage parents and educators to be very careful of those headlines that suggest a causal relationship between child plays with iPad, child has this outcome. And that's where some of the brain development you asked about IQ, we don't know. We're starting to find some threads that are interesting, but under what conditions, for which child, at what age, and with what content does it have a negative outcome. So we're a ways away from really being able to say definitively what that looks like. And we've spent 40 years studying television, and we're still confused by some of that as well.
What do you think that we still need to learn then about technology that we don't know today?
Yeah, I think you said something earlier that really caught my attention. These are tools that were not designed for children, but they're in their world. So their parents' smartphone, a tablet, a smart speaker, or a voice-activated agent, these were not designed for kids. Now, the kids' media developers will quickly scramble to put some things on those platforms that are for kids. But there's a disconnect between the intent of the technology and what it fundamentally can do, and what we try to do with some of the software and some of the games and apps. So yeah, I think it's an interesting time for us to think about what are we doing with these screens? What's different than what we know from before? What's actually very much the same, and we do have knowledge of from before. But we can't ignore that the world is different, these screens are different. This multi-touch screen, that was a game changer for preschoolers and technology. Suddenly they could swipe and tap instead of having to use a keyboard or a mouse, which are very cognitively challenging tasks for young kids. So, the interface did open up immediately, but we didn't sit around thinking, could we create a multi-touch screen for kids? We thought about how we create a multi-touch screen for adults.
Right. So you're saying that you don't think that there's a negative correlation at all, like having the kids learn on the technology devices, like it doesn't help. I know that sometimes it's really just more the social aspect that they would be missing out by not engaging and forming the social skills as the main kind of watch out with technology. Yeah,
for me, these are tools for learning.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm excited about it. That's why I keep studying it and talking about it. There's an open-ended nature to this that's powerful and is new and is not like anything kids in previous generations have had. So I think we do need to think about what are the potentials, what are the pitfalls. I would argue that we know the potentials better than we know the pitfalls. That we can imagine ways for kids to use these technologies that are positive and that have outcomes that are good for them. We're in the 21st century. Parents are concerned about the children having a skill set that they'll need as adults. I always like to remind parents that we need to focus on them right now, right today. They're 3-year-olds today. Yes, a 3-year-old who uses technology may be developing some familiarity or some skills that will carry them well into the future, but I don't need to have 3-year-olds coding so they can be programmers at 21.
Right, because those jobs might not even be around.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Anything else that you think parents need to know, or that you would recommend for parents as tips for managing their children and technology use?
Sure, absolutely. I might start with the hardest one, which is to be mindful of their own media use, particularly in front of children. Children are watching. You are the #1 media role model for a young child. They look up to their parents and they figure that's the way to use media. So I do think parents need to be mindful. They need to find opportunities to engage jointly with their child, to use the technology together. We can't always be sitting side by side with our child, but we can be asking a question from the other side of the room, from the kitchen while we're preparing dinner, and make it a more dialogic experience. Tell me what you're doing now, what choices are you making, what's happening in the game. And I like to say to parents, and then the big question is, what are we going to do when we turn it off? Which foreshadows for a child, and they're not going to like it when the time actually comes, but foreshadows for a child that there's a time for using the technology and a time when we're not. But that seems wrong to children when there's never an off for their parents, right? So mom or dad's smartphone is always on. They're always looking at it. They're always checking their messages, and yet I get my 30 minutes. So I think we have to think about that. I think they have to trust their instincts. They know their child really well. They know their goals and their dreams and aspirations for their child really well. They might feel like they don't know these new tools so well. Well, that's going to come. But in the meantime, trust your instincts. You are the parent, and you can make good choices here. I think we spend a lot of time bashing parents and shaming parents into feeling like they aren't competent in the digital age and aren't ready to help the children with this. I think that's a shame because then parents start to feel like I can't control this. There's nothing I can do about it.
Right.
I think a parent who feels, no, in fact, I can make choices and we can have a healthy media environment in our home. We can live well with media in our home and define that for ourselves. That's a much more positive situation. And now, full circle, the child who's watching a parent who's in control and has a plan and has rules and limits, but also has opportunity, is learning that that's the way you use media, not that it's on 24/7.
Right. And there's no cut answer, I guess. It's just sort of individual. It's hard to, have one answer. I guess.
Yeah, and I think we continue to learn about opportunities that are positive. We continue to learn about cautions and concerns. Parents ought to be paying attention to that. But my advice is to embrace the digital age that we all are now living in. We didn't grow up with these tools, but our children are. Let them show us how to use them sometimes. Let them be the teacher. When something won't work on your tablet, take it to your 4-year-old and ask them to fix it, and they'll have it fixed in no time. So, if adults are willing to let that role be reversed sometimes and recognize that the 4-year-old, actually, this is their world and we're just, visiting, that can be really positive. And we can give some opportunities for empowerment to the child as well at the same time.
That's great. I think this is really interesting. It doesn't make it any less confusing, but I think it's great to know. I appreciate you sharing all your research and kind of giving a broader perspective of, like you said, everything's so negative and the positive ways that we can use it with our kids. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for the opportunity.
If you know someone who'd be a great fit for the show, come on over to ingeniousbaby.com and share your tips and story ideas. You are your baby's first and best teacher.